This is from 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan B. Peterson. In that book, he writes an entire segment purely on comfort and discomfort. And there was a paragraph that really spoke to me as someone who I feel like perpetually inhabits uncomfortable situations. So I'm going to read that to you now. It says, "We eternally inhabit order, surrounded by chaos. We eternally occupy known territory, surrounded by the unknown. We experience meaningful engagement when we mediate appropriately between them. We are adapted, in the deepest Darwinian sense, not to the world of objects, but to the meta-realities of order and chaos, yang and yin. Chaos and order make up the eternal transcendent environment of the living. To straddle that fundamental duality is to be balanced, to have one foot firmly planted in order and security, and the other in chaos, possibility, growth, and adventure." Another segment that he wrote is, order is not enough. You can't just be stable and secure and unchanging, because there are still vital and important new things to be learned. Nonetheless, chaos can be too much. You can't long tolerate being swamped and overwhelmed beyond your capacity to cope while you're learning what you still need to know. Thus, you need to place one foot in what you have mastered and understood, and the other in what you're currently exploring and mastering. Then you have positioned yourself where the terror of existence is under control and you're secure, but where you're also alert and engaged. That is where there's something new to master and some way that you can be improved. That is where meaning is to be found. And in the last episode, I touched on discomfort and specifically about what it's like to be a nomad and what it's like to be a nomadic backpacker in an unfamiliar, well, I won't say unfamiliar, in a foreign country right now during the COVID pandemic. And it just seems like I've been receiving a lot of messages, whether from Big Brother or the universe or whatever you call it, over the last few days, all about discomfort and exploring and trying new things. And in the few days before I left where I was living before, I'm in Wellington now, I made it. I was waking up in the morning like in the middle of a panic attack. It was like it started before I even woke up. And when I woke up, my heart was pounding and it was hard to breathe. And my brain just automatically went to the dark places where I was just freaking out about what might go wrong, or, what if this happens and what if this happens? And that's not healthy. And so I think, reading that 12 Rules for Life book, and reading that segment on, what Jordan Peterson had to say about comfort and discomfort and change and order and chaos, and the way that those are all actually, very closely related to each other, definitely helped put things in perspective for me. So it's like, even though I'm suffering from anxiety, at the same time I'm in a panic attack, there's part of my brain that's like, actually none of this is real. Like, my brain is just running away with, things that probably won't happen, things that are much less likely to happen than they are likely to happen. And especially that part that I just read where he said, you can't just be stable, secure, and unchanging, because there are still vital and important new things to be learned. I hear that a lot, and I see when people who took a risk and did something outside of what's considered the norm by their surrounding community, or their home culture, when they dare to be vulnerable and say, hey, actually things are kind of tough right now. I find that there's often this reaction where people kind of have this attitude of, I told you so, or like, well, you got yourself into this mess for doing it. And they'll always, then people will try to be understanding, and they'll say things like this: you can't just be stable, secure, and unchanging, because there's still vital and important new things to be learned. There's something you can learn from this. And after you hear that for the 700th time, that's not really helpful. So that next sentence where he writes, nonetheless, chaos can be too much. You can't long tolerate being swamped and overwhelmed beyond your capacity to cope while you're still learning what you need to know. That's a response that, if I'm in that situation where I dare to be vulnerable with someone who dared to do something different and, took a risk, maybe went outside their comfort zone, and now is opening up, that is a response that, at least to me personally, would be very helpful. There are new things to be learned, but there's also a boundary that needs to be drawn. Is drawn the right term? When you realize that your mental well-being is potentially being compromised. I can't tell you how many times over the last 8 years of me being on the road, I mean, even before then, but especially being on the road, finding work, traveling, meeting people, feeling obligated to meet people, that type thing. I can't tell you how many times I've been burnt out and just completely emotionally wasted. But still, there was that pressure to keep going. There's still things to be learned, and that's not always the most helpful or healthy response, whether you're giving that response to yourself or whether someone, you're giving it to someone else or someone's giving it to you. Only you know where that boundary is. Only you know the line between your well-being and, pushing yourself to prove to yourself that you can do it. What I'm not saying is that every time you feel challenged, you should stop, because that is definitely not healthy. But I'm also not saying that when you feel uncomfortable or when your intuition is telling you, hey, I need a break, I need to step away from everything for a while, I need some breathing room, I need to get a brainless job that, maybe I don't have to use creative, organic thought all the time. Maybe I can just do something simple and just give myself a break and recuperate for a while. Only you know that boundary for yourself. And only through spending time with yourself will you become more familiar with where that boundary actually is. It's definitely one that requires some thought in the beginning, because if you're like me, you constantly want to push yourself beyond your capacity. No, it's not that big a deal, like other people are doing way more, I can do way more, it'll be fine, blah blah blah. But that's damaging. It can be damaging. if it becomes like your default mode of existence, you know? Or on the other hand, I feel like a natural human tendency is, oh, no, this feels uncomfortable. This doesn't feel right. This is putting half a toenail over my comfort zone line. I should not do that. That's equally damaging sometimes. So you get what I'm saying about finding that line and drawing your personal boundaries. Mentally, physically as well, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, all of those things. That's the hard part of wellness and taking care of ourselves. And, you know, whether you're living at home and you have that stable, secure life, or if you're like me and you're, a frequent traveler and you're on the road and, there are challenges for both of those situations. In some ways, having a home is easier. In some ways, being on the road is easier. So we can't look at somebody else's lifestyle and say, oh, well, they've gotten themselves into that. No, because you can't always have stability and security, and you also can't always have chaos, you know? The last episode ended with us thinking about whether we are pessimist or optimist or, realist, idealist, whatever. And me personally, what I mentioned was that I'm a make the best of what you got-ist. And, that really is a skill that takes some time to be honed, especially because the way that I live, traveling so much and living out of a backpack, is something that people don't understand. I do get a lot of criticism for it. Most people, including my family, don't understand what exactly it's like or what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. But the thing is, no matter what your situation is in life, you need to be rooted in yourself and understand that you know what's best for you and follow your intuition about that. All right, talk to you next time. Don't forget to follow me at Art everywhere.